In the heart of Lagos, where the streets buzzed with life and opportunity, a wealthy woman named Adana held a secret close to her heart. She was the daughter of one of the most successful business moguls in the city, with more wealth than she could ever spend in a lifetime. But there was one thing money couldn't buy: trust. Adana had always been suspicious of the intentions of the men who courted her. Were they truly in love with her, or merely with her wealth? That's when she met Connor, a man whose sincerity seemed unquestionable. He was kind, humble, and lived a simple life working as a fisherman. He loved Adana deeply, or so it seemed. They married, and soon after, Adana devised a bold plan to test her husband's loyalty. She decided to pretend to be blind. Adana wanted to see if Connor would remain faithful to her when he thought she could no longer see his actions. She hid her vision from him, pretending to need his assistance for everything. Connor, at first, seemed to embrace the role of caring for his now blind wife, but Adana knew she was setting the stage for a larger revelation. Weeks passed, and Adana's life as a blind woman became her new reality. She relied on Connor for every movement, trusting that he would guide her in love and devotion. Yet, each day she silently observed him. Connor's behavior began to change. The man who once lavished her with attention and affection grew distant. Connor, unaware that Adana could see everything, began sneaking out late at night. Adana, with sharp hearing and keen senses, followed him discreetly one evening. Her heart sank as she saw him enter the small, run-down house of a woman named Ifeoma. Ifeoma, a seamstress from the outskirts of town, had a reputation for her beauty and charm, despite her simple background. Connor's affair had begun in secret, but Adana was now painfully aware of it. She watched from the shadows as the two laughed and shared intimate moments, unaware that Adana's blind eyes were watching every betrayal. Adana wrestled with her emotions. Her plan had worked, revealing Connor's unfaithfulness, but the pain that followed was unbearable. She hadn't expected it to hurt this much. Still, she decided not to confront Connor immediately. Instead, she began to drop subtle hints that made Connor squirm in discomfort. One evening, as they sat together in their lavish home, Adana spoke softly. "Connor, if I could see, I wonder what things I would discover about you." The statement hung in the air, making Connor shift nervously. His response was clumsy. What do you mean, Adana?" "I've been by your side every day." Adana smiled, though there was no warmth in it. "Yes, you've been around. But sometimes, one wonders if presence is the same as loyalty." Connor's guilt began to surface. He hadn't yet realized the depth of Adana's knowledge, but her words made him uneasy. The walls of deception were slowly closing in on him. Ifeoma was not a fool. While she enjoyed Connor's attention, she often wondered how long their secret affair could last. It wasn't like Connor to take risks, but lately, he'd been more daring. He would visit her during the day, claiming Adana was too blind to notice his absence. But Ifeoma had her own suspicions. One afternoon, as Connor slept beside her after a long day at sea, Ifeoma found herself thinking about the woman he had married. She had heard stories of Adana's intelligence, and even though she was supposedly blind, Ifeoma couldn't shake the feeling that Adana knew more than Connor gave her credit for. Determined to confirm her suspicions, Ifeoma set out to investigate. She started visiting the markets Adana frequented and speaking with people who knew her. The more she learned, the more convinced she became that Adana wasn't truly blind. Ifeoma was now caught in a web of lies that seemed ready to unravel at any moment. Back at home, Adana's emotional turmoil deepened. Though she had known her plan would lead to difficult revelations, she hadn't anticipated the depth of her heartbreak. Yet, even in her sorrow, Adana couldn't bring herself to hate Connor. Her love for him was real, and despite his betrayal, she still yearned for his affection. But how could she continue living with a man who had cheated on her? She began to question her own actions. Was it wrong to have tested Connor this way? Would things have been different if she had trusted him from the start? The weight of her decisions pressed heavily on her, but she knew there was no turning back. Adana considered confronting Ifeoma directly, but something held her back. She wanted to see just how far Connor would go, to fully understand the man she had married. The game was still in play, and the end was not yet in sight. One day, while Adana was sitting in her garden, contemplating her next move, she overheard two market women gossiping nearby. Their words struck her like a thunderbolt. "Did you hear? Ifeoma's pregnant," one of the women said. "And they say it's Connor's child." Adana's heart stopped. This was more than just an affair, it was a betrayal that carried consequences. If Ifeoma was indeed pregnant, it meant Connor had crossed a line that could never be undone. Adana's mind raced. What would she do now? Should she confront Connor with this new information, or wait for him to confess? But Connor said nothing. Days passed, and he continued his charade, pretending to be the loyal husband, all while knowing that another woman carried his child. Adana felt the weight of her silence bearing down on her. The knowledge of Connor's betrayal and Ifeoma's pregnancy had drained her. But something unexpected began to stir within her, the quiet strength. If she had survived this long without revealing her plan, surely she could face whatever lay ahead. She decided it was time for Connor to see the woman he had underestimated. No longer would she pretend to be weak or blind to the truth. But she would not confront him in anger or shame. Instead, she would force Connor to confront the truth about himself. Adana invited Connor to dinner one evening. The air between them was thick with unspoken words, but Connor was oblivious. As they ate, Adana's gaze fixed on him, her mind working behind her calm exterior. Soon, the revelation would come, but not in the way Connor expected. Connor had grown accustomed to Adana's blindness, and in many ways, it had made him careless. He didn't notice the small shifts in her behavior, the way she moved around the house with increasing confidence. In his mind, Adana was still the helpless woman he had to guide through life, blind to the world around her. But Adana's silence was her greatest weapon. She listened to Connor's stories, nodding as he lied about his late nights at the market, pretending to be busy with work. Each lie became a thread in the tapestry of deception he wove, and Adana patiently watched it unravel. Connor was oblivious to the fact that his world was about to come crashing down. Adana knew that the time was nearing when she would reveal everything, but not before Connor trapped himself in his own dishonesty. As Ifeoma's pregnancy advanced, she grew more desperate for Connor's full commitment. She wanted to be more than his hidden lover, she wanted to be his wife, the mother of his child, openly acknowledged. But Connor was hesitant. He couldn't bring himself to break things off with Adana, even though his heart had drifted away. Ifeoma pressed him for answers. "What's your plan, Connor? How long do you think we can keep this secret?" Connor didn't have an answer. He had tangled himself in a web that now seemed impossible to escape. His affair had turned into something more than he ever anticipated, and the weight of his lies was crushing him. But instead of confronting the truth, Connor continued to delay, hoping things would somehow resolve on their own. Adana had planned this moment carefully. One evening, she invited Connor to sit with her in the living room, her eyes covered as always, the mask of blindness still firmly in place. "Connor," she began softly, "I've been thinking about how much you've cared for me since I lost my sight. I'm grateful for your patience." Connor smiled weakly. "Of course, Adana. I'll always take care of you." Adana's lips curled into a faint smile. "But there's something you don't know." She reached up and removed the blindfold covering her eyes. Connor froze as her sharp gaze pierced through him. "I can see, Connor," Adana said, her voice calm but firm. "I've always been able to see." The color drained from Connor's face. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. Adana watched him, her expression unreadable. "And I've seen everything," she added. Connor's face twisted in confusion and panic. You've been pretending all this time." Adana nodded, her gaze never leaving his. "I needed to know if you truly loved me, Connor. And now, I know." The weight of her words hung heavily between them. Connor collapsed into the nearest chair, his hands covering his face. "Adana. I never wanted to hurt you." "Yet, you did," Adana replied, her voice steady. "And now, there's a child. What are you going to do about that?" Connor looked up at her, his eyes wide with fear and guilt. He had no answer. For the first time since their marriage, he felt completely exposed. Adana's deception had mirrored his own, but her version carried the weight of truth. "I was a fool, Adana," Connor whispered. "But I still love you. I've made mistakes, but I never stopped loving you." Adana sat in silence, contemplating Connor's words. Did she believe him? Could she forgive him for the pain he had caused? The thought of Ifeoma and her unborn child filled her mind, complicating everything. Forgiveness wasn't an easy thing, but Adana knew that carrying the weight of hatred would only destroy her. Connor's betrayal had cut deep, but her love for him hadn't disappeared entirely. It lingered, wounded but alive. "I don't know if I can forgive you yet, Connor," Adana finally said. "But I do know this: we can't keep living like this." Connor looked at her, hope flickering in his eyes. "I'll do anything to make it right." Adana shook her head. "I don't know if it can be made right. But we have to face the consequences of your choices. We have to figure out what happens next." Adana decided that the first step toward resolution was meeting Ifeoma. She needed to confront the woman who had become entangled in her marriage, not out of anger, but for clarity. Arranging a quiet meeting in a small cafe away from the city's bustling center, Adana sat at a table, waiting for Ifeoma to arrive. When Ifeoma finally appeared, she looked nervous, her hands trembling as she greeted Adana. "I didn't know you could see," Ifeoma whispered, her voice filled with a mix of fear and regret. Adana smiled faintly. "There's a lot you didn't know. But this isn't about the past, it's about what happens now. You're carrying Connor's child, and that complicates everything." Ifeoma looked down at her hands, guilt weighing heavily on her. "I never wanted to hurt you, Adana." "And yet, here we are," Adana replied. "So, what do we do now?" The cafe's quiet atmosphere felt heavy with the tension between the two women. Adana's gaze remained calm, though her heart was conflicted. Ifeoma, on the other hand, was visibly anxious, her thoughts racing as she tried to find the right words. "I don't know what to do," Ifeoma admitted. "I didn't think it would go this far." Adana nodded slowly. "Neither did I. But now, we have to decide how to move forward. This child will be born soon, and Connor is involved whether we like it or not." Ifeoma's eyes filled with uncertainty. "Do you want to stay with him?" The question hung in the air for a moment. Adana took a deep breath before answering. "I don't know. But I do know that whatever happens, this child will need a family, and we have to figure out what that looks like." Connor had never felt so powerless. The revelation of Adana's vision and her discovery of his affair had shaken him to his core. Now, he stood at a crossroads, unsure of how to proceed. He loved Adana, but he couldn't deny the bond he had formed with Ifeoma and the child she was carrying. He spent sleepless nights pacing the house, replaying every decision he had made, every lie he had told. The guilt gnawed at him, but he knew there was no easy solution. Both women had been hurt by his actions, and now, he had to choose how to make amends. But which path would lead to redemption? Was it even possible to heal the wounds he had caused? Adana returned from her meeting with Ifeoma feeling more resolved. She had seen the woman's sincerity and fear, and though it didn't erase the pain of betrayal, it gave Adana a sense of clarity. It was time to propose a solution, one that would require immense strength and understanding from all involved. Gathering Connor and Ifeoma together in their home, Adana addressed them both with calm authority. This situation is far from ideal, but we need to think about the child. We need to stop thinking only of ourselves. Connor and Ifeoma listened, their faces tense with anticipation. I propose we raise this child together, Adana said, her voice steady. Not as enemies, but as a family. If we can't undo what's been done, then we have to find a way to move forward, for the sake of this child. Connor was speechless. He had expected anger, perhaps even rejection from Adana, but this was beyond anything he could have imagined. Adana, the woman he had betrayed, was offering to share the responsibility of raising Ifeoma's child. It was an act of compassion he didn't feel he deserved. Ifeoma, too, was stunned. She had braced herself for hostility from Adana, but instead, she was being offered a chance at peace. Tears welled in her eyes as she struggled to find words. Are you serious? Ifeoma asked, her voice trembling. Adana nodded. This isn't going to be easy. But I believe it's the best way forward. The child deserves to be raised with love, not in the shadow of our mistakes. Connor looked at Adana with a mixture of awe and guilt. I don't deserve this, he whispered. Adana's gaze softened. Maybe not. But we can all start over, if we choose to. In the weeks that followed, the strange new dynamic between Adana, Connor, and Ifeoma began to take shape. It was awkward at first, as each of them navigated their new roles, but there was a shared understanding that the child's well-being came first. Adana, though still hurt, found herself growing stronger each day. She wasn't just the wealthy woman who had been betrayed, she was a pillar of grace and wisdom. Connor, humbled by Adana's decision, worked tirelessly to prove that he could be the man she once believed him to be. He knew it would take time for trust to return, but he was willing to fight for it. Ifeoma, too, softened. She had never intended to tear Connor's life apart, and now, she was grateful for the chance to rebuild something better, even if it wasn't the life she had originally imagined. Over time, Adana and Ifeoma began to develop a tentative friendship. It wasn't easy, and there were still moments of tension, but they shared a common goal, to raise the child in a loving environment. Adana had learned that holding on to resentment would only poison her spirit, and so she made a conscious effort to let go of the past, bit by bit. Ifeoma, too, found herself changing. She had once envied Adana's wealth and status, but now she saw the strength and dignity that truly defined her. Ifeoma realized that there was much to learn from Adana's resilience and grace. Together, they created a space where the child could grow, free from the bitterness of the past. Connor, for his part, worked hard to redeem himself. He no longer took his role as a husband or father for granted. He spent more time with Adana, rebuilding the trust he had shattered. He also supported Ifeoma throughout her pregnancy, ensuring that she was cared for and respected. Though the journey was far from easy, Connor felt a deep sense of gratitude for the second chance he had been given. He knew that he had caused immense pain, but he was determined to prove that he could be the man both Adana and Ifeoma needed him to be. Every day was a step toward healing, and Connor was willing to walk that path, no matter how long it took. The day finally arrived when Ifeoma gave birth to a healthy baby girl. The birth was a moment of mixed emotions for all involved. Connor was overjoyed, though the weight of his past mistakes still lingered in his heart. Ifeoma, exhausted but radiant, held her daughter with pride, knowing that despite everything, this child was a blessing. Adana stood beside them, watching the scene unfold. She felt a pang of sadness, but also a quiet sense of acceptance. This child, though born of betrayal, was innocent. And Adana had made the choice to welcome her into their lives with open arms. As the baby cried for the first time, Adana knew that this was the beginning of a new chapter for all of them, a chapter filled with hope, healing, and, perhaps, forgiveness. As the weeks passed, Adana, Connor, and Ifeoma adjusted to their new roles. They found themselves working together as a family, caring for the baby and supporting one another. Though their bond had been born out of difficult circumstances, it was slowly transforming into something deeper, something built on love, respect, and understanding. Adana had grown to love the child as if she were her own. She had chosen not to let the past define her, and in doing so, she had found a sense of peace she hadn't thought possible. Connor, too, had become a better man, more attentive, more present, more grateful for the second chance he had been given. Ifeoma, though still adjusting to her new life, had found a sense of purpose and belonging that she hadn't expected. Together, they formed an unconventional but strong family. Lagos, with its vibrant energy and endless possibilities, became the backdrop for their healing. The city, once a place of secrets and lies, now seemed to pulse with new life.